Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I am back with another episode of 5 Minute Theory, where I teach you something about music in 5 minutes or less. And yes, this is the same recording session as the previous 5 Minute Theory. I was just really excited to finally be able to put the pieces together to give you the information on overtones and harmonics. And I just wanted to get it all done because I'm just super excited to finally have it all click in my head. This is a pretty tough topic even for me, so I hope that you guys are understanding this. Of course, if you have any questions or comments after the end of the video, feel free to leave them. Hopefully I can answer all questions and take all comments. Last time we talked about pitch, we talked about harmonics and just what exactly they are. And this time around, we're actually going to build our major scale off of this. But again, if you haven't watched the first part on this, stop what you're doing, watch that first, because you probably won't understand what I'm talking about if you don't watch that first. We're going to get going. Again, not going to use the timer. Don't want to put pressure on myself. I want to be able to give you every ounce of information that I need to before we get into scales. So, like I said before, tonight we're going to build our major scale, and a lot of our theory is based off of C, but I'm going to do this in A. First off, again, we had our fundamental, right, which was 110 hertz, our A2. If we were to double that wavelength to 220 hertz on our first overtone, we find that that is going to be a 3. Now, that is a distance of an octave. If we remember our major scale, the notes that we need to remember are going to be our first note, the major second, the major third, the perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and octave. So we already have our octave. For those who need a refresher, building an A scale, we have A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. So now we got the tools, right? So we figure out that from one A to another is going to be a ratio of 2 to 1. And that's going to be for any particular note and its octave. It's always going to be 2 to 1. A C to C, a G to G, so on and so forth. So we're going to be a 2 to 1. Another thing to note is a lot of what I'm doing is perfect numbers, like an even tempered, if everything was exactly the way it's supposed to be. However, as we're going to find out, there are a little bit of discrepancies between the numbers. Basically, the reason for that is to create perfect consonants, because some of the notes, if we were to keep it the way that it is, would just be a little bit sharp or a little bit flat. Not over the top most of the times, but just enough to be noticeable. Though honestly not too noticeable, which makes the numbers fine. Usually it's maybe a couple numbers off or a couple of tenths off. Though we will get to a point where it does get a little bit trickier. So we already have gotten our octave. Now we continue. So if we do another 110, that'd be 330, which we find out through scientific research, of course. I'm not just taking these numbers out of the air. So people have done this before, so I'm just talking verbatim what they have done. So 330, right? That would be an E4. Now, when we're doing our ratios, we're always going to go with the note that we're talking about and the unison note below it. So for our ratio, we're going to go 330 over 2, which is going to be a 3 to 2. So for our perfect fifth, A to E, we have now a 3 to 2 ratio. So that's going to work for any perfect fifth in the spectrum. That is also going to be important down the line when we talk about circle of fifths, but we're not going to get into that just yet. Just know that basically, as the second overtone, it is the next most consonant note that we can hear, and one that feels just perfect together. Going from there, our third overtone would be in A4. Already have the octave, don't need to worry about that, but we do see that the 440 and the 220 make it a 2 to 1. Going from there, we now go to our next harmonic, which would be 550, which would be a C sharp 5. So now we have our major third. So now we have 550 over 440, which makes it a 5 to 4 ratio. So any 5 over 4 ratio is going to be a major third. Going from there, we get 660. That's going to be an E5. Again, 660 to 440, so that's going to be a 6 to 4 or a 3 to 2 ratio. And honestly, if you look back 660, 330, you have a 2 over 1, which means you got an octave there. Seeing how these numbers work and how it's so consistent. Next harmonic is going to be 770, which is going to be a G5. This technically isn't in our major scale, but we're going to go back to it in just a second as to a possible explanation to that. So 880 is going to be A5, 990 is going to be B5. So now we have B5 being 990, A5 being 880. So we now have a 9 to 8 ratio. So any 9 to 8 ratio is going to be a distance of a major second. Now, going back to G5 for a second. Technically, it's in the middle between F sharp 5 and G5 for 770, and technically G5 is the closest of the two, being at 783. However, if you were to go to F sharp, which is a valid response to that, you now have with A, B, C sharp, E, and F sharp, you now have the pentatonic scale, a scale that's widely used throughout the world. So it's interesting that the first few overtones that you hear build such a common scale. The overtone scale being very interesting scale. However, I'm going to keep it as G5 because that is the closer of the two. So we still don't technically have an F sharp yet. We are still waiting on a D, an F sharp, and a G sharp. So let's keep going. As we go on, and unfortunately I can't play the guitar anymore for this, so now all you get is numbers. So next up would be 1100, which would be C sharp 6. We already have C sharp, so we don't need to go over that one again. 1210, D sharp 6, not in our scale. 1320, E6. 1430, F6. 1540, G6. But what you are noticing is these intervals are getting shorter because the frequencies are getting so fast and also so weak that you're not able to get so much more out there. Your distances are starting to get so small. Next we have 1650, G sharp 6. Now we finally got that 7th. So if we go back from G sharp 6, right, 1650, and then we have A5, which is 880, you get a ratio of 15 to 8. So any 15 to 8 ratio is going to be a major 7. But now you're starting to see that these particular intervals are becoming more and more hard to find, making them less common and also more dissonant. So we continue with 1760, which is back to A. Then we have A sharp 6 at 1870. We have B6 at 1980, a C7 at 2090. We have C sharp 7 at 2200. And then we finally get to D7 at 2310. Now, this is a tricky one because this is a very common ratio. However, when I was saying about how sometimes these are kind of off, this is one that definitely gets there because D7 is actually 2349, so you're already like off by 39, which is kind of hard to explain away. But the ratio is supposed to be 23 over 10 over 1760, which should be a 4 to 3 ratio, as close as possible to that, but it comes out to, I believe it's like 1.31, but that's kind of alright, it's not too bad. So we kind of keep it as a 4 to 3 ratio, so any 4 to 3 ratio is going to be a perfect 4. It's just weird because it doesn't necessarily show up until like you're getting to like your 20th or plus overtone. But the reason for that is, even though it's called a perfect fourth, and it's a pretty common interval because it's the reciprocal of the perfect fifth, it's a very tense note in the major scale, and it wants to go back to the major third. So that's probably why you don't really hear it in the overtone. But we got to keep going because we have one more note that we need to get. So continuing on, this is where it gets a little bit tricky because now you're even getting to a point where you're going less than a half step. You're getting more into quarter tones. So like at 1420, you don't even have anything. It's not until 2530 where you get a D sharp 7. And like even still then, you're like off by like 40. 2640, you got E7. 2750, you have F7. 2860, you have nothing. And then 2970, you have F sharp 7. We finally have that major 6. So the ratio is supposed to be 5/3, but like once you actually get it to like the actual tempered way, it's about like, I want to say 1.68. Again, not too far off. But it's actually pretty interesting because like as you get the more unstable notes, that's the ones where the perfect math strays farther away from that than a more consonant note. The 6 is kind of another one that's not super stable because it doesn't really have much of a place to go. So we finally have all of our notes, and that's why our major scale is built the way that it is. It's because of these overtones that build off on each other. It's very interesting, and I'm glad I finally found a way to be able to explain that. But basically what that means is that you could also build every single scale off of these ratios. So octave is 2 to 1, fifth 3 to 2, fourth 4 to 3, third 5 to 4, sixth 5 to 3, second 9 to 8, and then major 7th 15 to 8. And it's nice to know that like the more dissonant notes are the ones where the ratios are such harder to create. But anyways, this was a very long video. I hope that you got all that, and I hope that you understand why these notes are how they are. Now that we have the scientific building blocks of these, now we got to go over the actual notes of the scale, our solfege and everything like that, and then we can finally get into some scales and learn them. Of course, thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments about this video or any other topics that you'd like me to teach you guys, feel free to leave that in the comment section. Share this with your friends, and most importantly, please subscribe to my channel. If you learned anything from today, I bid you to please subscribe, because then you can learn more content. I'm also going to leave a couple of things both in the description but also in the links. So basically I'm going to link every single one of these videos that I took a look at to help me understand this. I'm also going to link you guys the frequencies when it's tuned to 440 Hertz, which is basically what this is. So that way you can have an understanding of the math behind it. But I promise you, for a while, we're not going to have any math. Thank you for indulging me, and I'll see you in the next 5-minute theory. This is me as a fan, and I'm signing off.